Hello, YouTube. We are here recording our podcast live. If you stop by and talk in the chat, feel free. But we will not respond to you until the end because we're recording live. Thank you in advance. Goodbye. Hello and welcome to the Nerdosphere. I'm one of your hosts, Clayton, joined as always by my brother, the Red Guardian himself, Corbin.
Good afternoon.
Hello, how are you?
I'm doing well. I am actually partaking in the virgin apple cider.
Virgin apple cider,
yes, so we're a Fedorsky.
Russia says yes, virgin apple
Yes,
cider.
don't call me a vodka Slav. I am
no vodka in this is virgin, no vodka.
No, I do not eat potatoes.
No,
I eat
potatoes are
apples.
for Irishmen, not for you.
I try to keep doctor away.
You eat pears and vodka.
They say apple, they take doctor away. So then I drink apple cider. The same principles. You drink apple, doctors still stay away. So this is, yes.
Yet.
Repito.
We're also joined by infamous Team Rocket, Jesse, James.
How's it going?
Meowth, that's right.
Yeah, little do you guys know I'm actually
right.
Meowth. Actually, I'm not Jesse or James. I just fit Meowth's role.
Yes.
So, does that mean Clayton and I are Jesse and James?
I guess so. I'm the one that looks at you guys like you're idiots sometimes because you guys can't get anything right.
Interesting.
What the fuck does that mean?
Interesting.
That's how Meowth looks at Jesse and James all the time. Like, really? You guys couldn't do that? Couldn't catch Pikachu that time?
Well, I hope the audience welcomes and is glad to hear my calm introduction, as last week I was not a part of Paul Tremblay joining the podcast, and Corbin was extremely loud in the beginning. So I'm back to bring things down to normal.
Paul said that I can keep the job.
I know he did, but he has no say here. And he also was throwing shade my way. Thanks for coming to my rescue, by the way.
You're welcome. I almost edited it out. to keep the joke.
I will say this: it's a stark difference between this intro because I'm only here when you're here, Clayton. So like I only hear your calm introduction,
right?
And then I have Corbin on the other hand every week screaming "Welcome to Anime Ultra,"
right?
So it's like such a different. I didn't mean it was a bad thing. Okay. I'm just saying
it's just a stark difference.
Yeah, stark difference.
Stark difference.
Yeah, I like to engage the audience, let them know, hey, you're going to listen to three dudes talk for an hour. I better wake you up. While Clayton's like, let me put you to sleep now because at least when you fall asleep, we still get to listen.
Wow.
Yeah, you fire shots, I cock the gun.
Wow.
To fire back.
Yeah. Okay. Transitioning from that, what are we up to? I'll tell you what I'm up to. I'm rewatching Daniel Craig's James Bond movies in preparation for No Time to Die. And let me tell you, I'm having an interesting reaction to them. First of all, I remember liking Casino Royale quite a bit, and I've softened on that. I'm not as gung-ho about that one anymore. It's very obvious to me watching it now how influential the Bourne movie was to that movie, and also how Texas Hold'em being uniquely popular around the time that movie was released, how influential that was to the movie. Like, even though, you know, the Casino Royale story is an actual James Bond book, it's still like it's so obvious how influential modern Texas Hold'em like tournaments.
That was a weird time,
wasn't it? Though,
it was a weird time
because like I've never liked poker because I've never been good at it. But I remember even like it would be a weekend and we would be playing Texas Hold'em with people
or watching.
Like it was just
such
like
a strange era.
Yeah, that was right there with like the height of patriotism, where it's like, you mess with one New Yorker, you mess with all of us.
Yeah,
we're gonna
and then
throw
we're playing-
cans of food at Green Goblin.
And then go home and play Texas Hold'em.
Yeah.
And watch Born Identity.
Yeah.
So-
I'm walking here.
Interesting thing about James Bond is I actually really enjoy Daniel Craig as an actor.
Yes.
And I have enjoyed his so far that I've seen, but I'm actually not caught up on the James Bond series. James Bond has not been a series that I've traditionally gone back and watched any of. Like, I don't go out of my way to watch James Bond. I enjoy them whenever they're on TV. I typically see them as reruns at hotels and stuff like that when I'm traveling, but it's really weird where I don't know why I've just never had the drive to go see them in theaters, never had the drive to go back, even as much as I like Sean Connery, never gone back and watched any of his stuff if it wasn't just a rerun that's on TV. Pierce Brosnan is one of those actors that I actually can't stand, which is funny because he's good in a lot of stuff he does, but I just don't like him very much. I don't know what it is about him, but just don't have like an attachment to him as an actor. So I've never gone back and watched his stuff. It's weird because I've loved every James Bond movie I've seen, but I've just not ever gone out of my way to watch them. It's kind of a weird thing.
That's strange. See, I'm quite fond of the Bond films, and that's actually why I quite hate Daniel Craig's Bond, because they were the first Bond movies to not be Bond movies. Like, Bond films are ridiculous, campy, filled with gadgets, filled with misogyny to the degree where it's just fucking hilarious. Like, you cannot get away with what they did in today's.
So I have a retort.
It's so funny.
I have a retort to that I thought about while watching Quantum of Solace, which I'm gonna blow your mind now, Corbin. That movie is not as bad as I remember.
It has the worst Bond song. Alicia Keys and Jack White is worst duo for a song ever.
Jack White is awesome, though.
I mean, yeah, as an individual, he's great.
I would challenge you to go back and rewatch it.
No. In fact, current Bond did the Bond franchise such a disservice and pummeled us Bond fans so hard in the ground that in Skyfall, when he had a gun that only fired to his DNA signature, we were like, oh, he has a gadget, yay! Like, that's so fucking pitiful that a DNA triggered gun like was enough to get our jollies off, because we've been so stripped and deprived of what makes Bond unique. We're not.
He had the gadget-filled car. You're forgetting.
I'm gonna Bill Nighy cough in your
forgetting. So I don't have a retort for the gadgets, but I do have a retort for the over-the-top action. And my retort is that if you plucked the director that made Dr. No and had that epic underwater spear fight,
it's fucking awesome,
and you plucked him, gave him all the tools that were here today, you're telling me it wouldn't look similar?
No.
The reason you have over the top and campy on your mind is because you are viewing 1960s cinema with a modern view.
No, because 1960s cinema all the way up to Pierce Brosnan were all camp. Brosnan's movies
I'm going to argue the same
Goldeneye
thing for Pierce
camp.
Brosnan. It's only camp because it's a 90s movie and you're looking at it from today's view.
No one watched Goldeneye being like, this is a serious movie.
I guarantee you.
No, because we watched it in theaters. We were young enough to see it in theaters.
Yeah, I know.
And I knew it was a fun romp.
You didn't know it was a fun romp when we saw it in theaters. We were kids.
Fast and the Furious was cool.
You did not come out as a 7-year-old kid and think, that was a fun, campy romp.
Yeah, I don't.
I just can't with you right now.
No,
listen, at the end of the day, James Bond
Jesse's
has
about
to
say something
issue
that I think is going to validate me, so let him talk for a second.
I think the reason that they seem campy in the 90s is because that's what you went into believing they were going to be. I think because it was the tradition of Bond movies being campy, that's what you want them to be, but I don't think that they are. I don't think they're as well. I don't know. It's hard to
watch
say.
Octopussy and tell me differently. Octopussy. Go watch Octopussy and tell me
but
they were trying
again,
to make
it's
a
a-
highbrow action.
But
film.
again, you're watching a 1960s movie as a
Exactly.
2020s man. You're gonna think it's
Octopussies
over the top and
was
campy.
Yeah.
Late 70s, maybe 80s.
You get what I'm saying.
It was the Roger Moore era.
You get what I'm saying.
I don't think that you get what you're saying.
I do.
So let me
'Cause-
bring you guys off this topic where you guys are bickering about this. I mean, it's still within the James Bond realm here, but you guys obviously are bigger James Bond fans than me. So you probably heard the rumors of who the next James Bond was going to be at one point, and it was up in the air apparently between Tom Hiddleston and Idris Elba. Did you guys have a
Tom
horse in that
Hiddleston.
race?
Tom Hiddleston. Idris Elba's too old. My biggest issue with Idris Elba is the same issue that I've hated Craig for most of his run. He's too fucking old. We need someone who looks younger. So when they're parkouring ridiculousness, it doesn't look so weird.
I would argue that
You know that
Connery
Daniel Craig
was
does
just,
most of his own stunts.
I think he does, and I would argue that Connery looked as old as Idris Elba would have.
Connery
He
was
doesn't age well, and black don't crack.
What?
So
Idris
But-
Elba is a fantastic looking man. I can't think you can say.
but he's fucking old. He's
I
in his
don't
upper
think you can say.
he's in his upper 50s.
But so is everybody. So is every other leading male man.
No, Tom Hiddleston's in his 30s.
Hang on.
Yeah.
I'm like
About to have your mind fucking blown.
Wait, how old did you say Idris Elba was?
He's in his upper 50s.
No, he's not. He's 49.
Tom Hiddleston is 40. Thank you. You just challenged me to look it up and prove you.
I know. I just did the same for Idris Elba, and Idris Elba's 49. It's born in 1972. Now,
50 is still too old to be an action star.
He's not 50.
Sylvester Stallone needs to take the L. Arnold Schwarzenegger needs to take the L.
Sylvester
Tom Brady
Stallone is
needs
like
to take the L.
70. He's an old man. That would be too old. You're right. I can agree with you on that one.
I don't know. I'd been watching Luther at the time when when that was announced, and I was like, oh man, I would love to watch Idris Elba as James Bond. But that's just because I was also infatuated with Luther at the time.
Henry Cavill was recently
that'd be pretty
spoken
cool.
about. That would be kind of nice.
I could be down with that.
Yeah. Anyways, if you didn't know, this is the Nerdosphere. I didn't give you guys a chance to talk about did you guys have something that you're doing that you want to talk about?
Yeah, actually, I'm on episode 3 of Squid Games, motherfucker.
Oh,
I've already finished.
I finished it too, man. That's so good.
It is.
There's a couple things I have on. I have a couple thoughts on what I've watched so far. First of all, that motion sensor bullshit is way too fucking sensitive. That was crazy because it was so sensitive that you could
Red light, green light.
you could see the inconsistencies of like actors who moved just as much as actors who died and thought they weren't moving. So like that was a little irritating. So I was like,
Remember, red light, green light is played by kids. That was often called out one person over the other person isn't as frequently as they got it right or wrong. So like it makes sense to me that it would also have the same schoolyard rules where it's up to the quote unquote leader of the game to pick. And that's kind of what I felt like, where they were overlooking some of them. And I think part of it was, I have no evidence for this, but my thought process is that there was something in the algorithm was like, try to figure out who's actually trying to play this game and who is just playing it because type thing, where I tend to believe that that is part of it, but I could be wrong.
I can definitely get behind the schoolyard aspect that you brought up. I think that that's right on the money.
Yeah. The other thing, and it will really kind of depend on how the show ends or where it's going, but I'm not 100% jiving with them being released and then choosing to come back. Like it's not sitting well with me. That the majority of these people, because that's the rule, the majority have to come back in order for the game to resume. I understand it was a close call when they called it off, but I'm just not buying that even the people who said I want to continue went back to the real world and were like, yeah, I want to go back. And also, the dad is a fucking hypocrite. He punches the stepdad and it's like, money doesn't solve everything. It's not all about money. And then goes to risk his life to possibly leave his daughter fatherless to go win money.
I think they do a good job of, you follow the main character and you go through his thought process and his feelings and why he ends up going back, and you just kind of assume and push that out to everybody else. So like,
I think it makes less sense.
He was one of the most adamant of, we gotta stop this. Let's vote and stop this. And he chose to go back. So I think
what I'm saying is, I'm not fully convinced from what they showed me that him going back is something that his character would do, because he turned down the money from the stepdad to go risk his life, when the whole point is he didn't want to take the money from the stepdad because he wanted to be in his daughter's life.
Well, that comes down to
he's gonna potentially leave his daughter.
Well, that comes down to a point of pride. Like the stepdad is like, I will help you, but you have to sacrifice your relationship with your daughter. No, I'd rather do it myself, potentially sacrifice myself on my own terms to win for my family's sake.
And that even comes down to, I think that even comes down to a deeper discussion, which maybe this needs to be a whole nother episode, because I think there's a lot here. But I think the idea that he was willing to give up himself to risk being able to see his daughter, but not having the opportunity to have, like, essentially he's doing that in and of himself. He's not having that choice taken away. He's fighting for that choice.
Yeah.
By him just giving up, he's giving up that opportunity and essentially writing himself out of his daughter's life, compared to, like, at least if he does it this way, he gets the best of both worlds. He gets the money and his daughter.
Yep.
And man, when the game master spoke English for the first time, I was like,
you don't like this kind of talk.
I think so. This is coming from the standpoint of, I watched it and I loved it from the beginning, but this is also a show that fits right up my alley on what I enjoy. My brother came into it. He had asked me, it's really funny. Him and I hadn't talked in a couple of days, and we both messaged each other the same day, recommending different Netflix shows. And he had recommended Alice in Borderland, and I had recommended Squid Game. And he went into it kind of the same idea, where he's like, I really liked Alice in Borderland. And he did the same thing. He's like, I watched like 2 or 3 episodes and wasn't a fan. And then he reached out to me yesterday and was like, I watched the other 5 episodes. It's fucking phenomenal. And I was like, yeah, that's what, yeah, it gets there. It's
I'm liking it so far. I'm just saying there are bumps along the road that I have qualms with. It's not this perfect piece of media that everyone's been talking about.
I think it's pretty perfect.
I think it's great. I'm just saying that the issues that you had, I didn't have those same issues with the first time I watched it.
Yeah, me either. Jesse, is there anything fun you've been watching or doing, or anything you want to talk about? Or
not really. I actually started Cobra Kai, which has been fun.
I'm so sorry.
I had
Jesse.
So I went into
you're gonna summon Tim. He's gonna feel this out in the universe
without an invite. He's gonna pop in.
Yeah, he's gonna have this itch and just like sit up in his couch. Jesse.
Because he agrees with me, or disagrees?
No, because he agrees.
No, because he agrees with you.
He fucking loves it.
I know it so bad that I don't even need to waste my time with it based on what I've seen. But I've had to listen to Clayton and Tim talk about this show. And
no, so let me put this out there. I am not a huge, again, you guys are finding out more and more about me each week that I'm on this podcast, that I have a very weird taste in entertainment.
You do.
So I'm not it's really weird. I'm not about like rewatching classics. I'm not about rewatching stuff once I've seen it. And that goes for all, like, Back to the Future is fun. I've seen it once. I don't need to see it again. Alien is fun. I don't need to see it again. Like, Karate Kid was fun when I watched it. Don't need to see it again. But it's
Bible
fun.
Man is fun. You should see it again.
It's fun with. So my girlfriend loves these types of shows. Like, she loved Back to the Future. She loved Karate Kid. So I'm having as much fun watching it with her because she's getting enjoyment out of it, where that's enhancing my experience with this, where I don't know if in and of myself, like if this was me watching it by myself, I don't know that I would continue watching it necessarily. But because she's enjoying it so much, it's something we can bond over, where like there are moments that both make us laugh. And I think that's really big for a show like this, where I think if you get the right audience in front of it, it enhances the experience. And I think that's an important thing.
You've just let love blind you, Jesse. You've let it cloud your mind. manipulate you into liking things you normally wouldn't.
There is something to be said of the influence of those around you when you consume content, because one of our most wonderful patrons over the years and friend of the show, Micah, after The Last Jedi came out, said he liked it.
No, he did not.
And then when I said nah, he said, well, my kids really enjoyed it, so I think maybe that was part of it. So understandable.
He should have left his kids to the theater. No child of mine would like The Last Jedi.
Well,
because then I would not have no children.
Only Corbin knows this. The audience doesn't know this, but I actually used to have 4 boys, and the same thing happened to me. Like my 4th boy, who will not be named, enjoyed The Last Jedi, and I left him in the theater. So now I only have 3 boys.
Yes. That's true. That's a true story.
Yeah.
I locked him in the urinal stall.
Yeah, he's gone forever. It's like there never was a 4th boy.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
But anyways, I've taken us. I know you were catching up on what we wanted, but we're way off.
That makes sense because he likes The Dark Knight Rises. That's on brand.
Micah
that's on brand.
Yeah. Yeah, and I know you're listening to this, Micah. You're one of the only audience members that like reaches out and talks to us.
I know you're
and
listening
I know
to this.
you're listening to this. And yeah, we called you out.
And Ryan still watches The Flash, so he's called out too.
Oof,
God, that movie sucks.
The show.
Yeah, the show sucks. That's what I meant. I had movie on my mind, but yeah, that show is not good.
All right. Well, before we jump down any more rabbit holes, this is the Nerdosphere. We're a podcast that discusses anything from the silver screen to the small screen and everything in between, whether it be a show, a TV, a music, or a book. If you can nerd out about it, we could talk about it. And this week, we're continuing our Spooktober themes. And
I wish we had the
discussing
that 90s. I wish we had that 90s sound on. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I think Zoom just asked if I was playing music. That means I did a good job, right?
Yeah, it does.
Goodness. Anyways, tonight we're discussing new Netflix horror limited series phenomenon, Midnight Mass.
Brought to us by the horrible, beautiful mind of Mike Flanagan,
who also brought us House on the Bly Manor and
the Haunting of Hill House.
Yeah, that one.
And Bly Manor.
Those 2 shows about houses and manors.
But this one is the best of those 3.
Oof, yeah, it's really good. It's very, very good.
I don't know if I agree with that.
Oh.
Just close. I think Haunting at Hill House is still better.
It is very good. Haunting at Hill House is very good. Corbin, start us off. What is Midnight Mass? This is
probably
spoilers.
Yeah. There's no
way, honestly, to talk about this without spoiling stuff. Really quick, let's just give general impression and whether we think it's worth people's time. That way they can decide if they want to pause this and go watch it and then come back. Okay. Corbin, go first.
So general impression.
Yeah. General.
It has been a long time since a show has gripped me to the point where I was jonesing for the next episode and was upset that I had to sleep between episodes. My girlfriend and I started Midnight Mass after our interview with Paul Tremblay, so it's already in the evening time. My girlfriend is someone who falls asleep at 8:30. We stayed up until 2 a.m. binging the first 4 episodes. We watched more than half of the show in one sitting, went to bed, made breakfast, and finished the show. This show had my attention in a way that no show has since Chernobyl. And Chernobyl is one of the greatest pieces of television we've had in recent years. It also moved me. It's been a while since I've watched a show where I cried. And I've had to look at myself in an introspective way, because this deals with themes like religion and these big ideas and I fucking loved it.
Jesse,
yes, it's worth your time.
how about you?
So yeah, no, I agree. It was one of the first shows in a while that I was actually anticipating / excited getting back to my seat to watch. I think having reflected on it a little bit more, that I have some stuff that I'm excited to talk to you guys about, that maybe has tilted my frame of thought a little bit, but not by any means like ruining the experience. It's just kind of put it in a different light for me, where I wasn't as blinded coming out of this. But there are some fun little Easter eggs in it as well, that we can get into that I think were really fun with. I really like Mike Flanagan a lot. I think he does a lot of really good stuff. So it's fun seeing this as something that I've kind of kept up with a little bit of what he's done, and him talking about this as like a passion project of his and all of that type of stuff kind of is exciting to see it finally come to fruition. So yeah, no, I think it's well worth the time. I think it's very intriguing. And what's fun about it to me is it's not the atypical horror, in my opinion. It's not, I wouldn't say it's as scary as Haunting at Hill House. So just throw it out there. I think the average horror enjoyer could get into this one.
Good points. I also think that this is well worth your time, if not for the sheer fact that this is a new and interesting property, which seems few and far between in the horror genre. A lot of times we get rehashed reboots or 9th and 10th movies of properties that have been already run into the ground. So for just the sheer fact of a new thing, it's worth your time. I will say that I was not waiting with bated breath for the next episode, like Corbin said. I watched it over several days, and I actually, about like between episodes 3 and 4, I really kind of had to make myself go back and watch it. That's not to say that I wasn't interested, but it wasn't like, ooh, I got to get back there and like watch it right now. But once you get to like episode 5, and we can get into it more, maybe my favorite single television episode of all time. Like episode 5 was phenomenal to me.
What was the title of that one?
I don't remember.
Was that the Apostles?
That was book 5, the Gospels.
Oh.
But yeah, it's worth your time. It's a great show. Just know that if you struggle a little bit staying super hyped on it, going through like episode 3 and 4, just go through it, power through it. It's well worth it. So, and that ends our general discussion. If that intrigues you and our opinions mean anything, and you want to watch this show and not have it ruined for you, pause this episode and go watch it if you haven't already, and then come back and listen. If you don't want to watch it, just keep on listening, because you want to listen to us, right? Please.
Yes, they do want to listen to us.
Okay. All right, spoiler territory.
Yeah.
Go, Corbin. Do it.
So there's so much I want to say. I feel like it's just like a whirlwind of words that I want to reach for. First and foremost, this show does something almost on an episode basis, where there is at least one dialogue-driven scene where it is a long sweeping shot where characters are like walking through the town or something. And those kind of moments tickle my brain. I fucking love it.
He really likes long shots, as we've seen in the other 2 shows.
It's something like those kind of scenes require so much coordination and requires so much of the actors to be on point. And I love that. The actor who played Father, what's his name? At this point, it's been like a week since I've seen it.
I get it for you. Hold on, I'm looking it up.
Signor?
It's Monsignor, but I don't know his actual name.
Monsignor.
Yeah, it's Monsignor, but I don't remember what his first name is. Do they mention his first name much?
They do some, But
Father Paul.
the actor who plays Monsignor.
Oh, Pruitt. It's Monsignor Pruitt.
Okay. So
Paul
Father
Pruitt.
Pruitt.
Father Paul. I'm sorry.
Father Paul. Is that where we're landing? His name is
so that's what he introduces himself at is Father Paul. So he's the one that he comes in, because if you remember in the first episode, he comes in and is like talking about how Pruitt is off the island. It went back for sick reasons, all that type of stuff. And he introduces himself as Father Paul, I believe. Yes. At the time in the first episode.
So Pruitt, the actor who plays Father Pruitt, commands the screen. He was so captivating. And there was a moment where I try not to talk when I watch shows like these, because I try to be fully engrossed. But there was a moment where I was like, I just had to tell Morgan, I was like, this actor is living his lines. Like actors, even really, really good actors, are like saying their lines, but like he has this way of like adding in these like stammers, these mannerisms that like it feels so like organic and real. This actor, he blew my mind. I've never seen him before, and I was like, "Oh, what the fuck?" A few drawbacks. I predicted everything like on episode 1. I was like, he's a vampire and he's feeding them blood. That's what's happening right now. And then even Morgan was like, that sounds real. That could be, but we'll see. So that like, it's hard for me to say that if that's a downside though, because I feel like it was masked pretty well in the plot. So I don't know if it was just, if you really like vampire stuff, you're just like more tuned to like spot this stuff out. So maybe other people watching it, they just didn't pick up on that stuff. That's a downside for me. But the biggest thing for me is the religious aspect of this show that just like really kind of made me take a step back, because, and it's one of those things where by the end of the show, I was glad certain things happened, because as the show's progressing, Monsignor Pruitt is knocking out these bangers of sermons. And honestly, there are a lot of things he's saying that resonated with me, where I'm like, actually, he's representing the scripture very accurately here. But then like you start to see like what he's doing. And then like I started to feel very conflicted, because I was like, he seems to understand the scripture, but he's like also kind of evil, but I don't feel like he's evil. So then I just kept watching like what else is happening. And then I realized what was happening. He ultimately was acting selfishly so that he could have a life with his daughter and with his love of his life. He wanted to have a second chance at a life that he never had. And it was one of those moments where this entire time, I never was receiving this show that it was demonstratizing like Catholicism or Christianity. Like it was belittling to the point of like, this is dangerous. This is silly. What I took away from it was the word of God is a very powerful thing that when used selfishly can be very destructive. And I felt like that was really powerful.
Yeah, I never once thought that they were belittling Christianity. In fact, they represent kind of 3 major views, with the sheriff and the Islamic side that he brings to it in different conversations. And then Riley, one of the main characters, is an atheist because of what happened to him before the show started. And he represents his beliefs really well. And I didn't feel like at any point were any of them belittling the other as far as like the show like being preachy or anything like that. They just honestly had a good honest representation of all 3 of those different views.
And I think what's interesting to hit on with that is the idea that I find myself in my walk in life at the moment, I find myself relating to Riley a little bit, where I grew up being religious. I grew up going through all the steps and everything. And then there was a tragic life event that happened in my life that kind of transitioned my thought to be like, okay, this loving God that I was taught about growing up has put me in this position where all of the sudden my world has been rocked. And I'm like, me as an imperfect human, how can I love somebody more than this professed God could, where I'm watching somebody I care about suffer when there's an omnipotent God that could take that away, and he chooses not to. And this is actually almost a conversation that I've had, like a conversation that he has at one point in the movie or in the TV series, is a conversation I've had with countless ones of my friends where, like, how can you say God loves us when we watch the atrocities of the world type thing? So I related to Riley, but even relating to him, I never felt like what was going on, like to hit on what you guys said, I never felt like that was something that was belittling Christianity. It was just interesting to see it from different standpoints. And I think the interpretation of the show depends on where you're standing at the moment, like where you are in your walk, faith wise, where you are on your walk in life, all of that type of stuff. I think you relate to somebody a little bit more depending on where you're at. And that was a really fun aspect of the show for me.
Yeah. And, because honestly, like, I very easily could have gone that way, like poking fun and belittling Christianity and stuff is kind of like low hanging fruit. You know what I mean? Especially like in Hollywood and stuff. Like that could have been very easily done. But even like you said, the conversation that Pruitt has with Riley on the topic that you said, I feel like they did a really good job at portraying both sides of that perspective and not being overly preachy. And you can just kind of take away from that what you will. The end scene where everyone is like, this is not okay, and they start seeing near God to thee, I wept during that scene. It was so beautiful to me. And that was something that I was not expecting when I started this show, of having a show that gave me new vampiric lore in a super interesting way, and then like touched me emotionally to the point where, yeah, my walk lately has been pretty distant, but it's caused me to like think about it again, which I haven't done in a long time. So this show is kind of weird for me.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's maybe why I came out of it feeling like it wasn't my favorite of the three. I mean, it was leaps and bounds better than Bly Manor, but the reason that Hill House was more impactful to me is because at the time of my life when I was watching Hill House, depression was something that I was dealing with, even to some extent within my own life and the people around me, where that hits so close to home, where you find out that that's a major play into why the story is progressing the way that it is. And that had such an impact for me that I was like, this is really interesting to see it depicted this way, and it having the essentially butterfly effect on a family, all because of something like this, which you see a little bit in this one as well, but it's from a more religious standpoint. And I think that maybe is why it salted me a little bit, is because where I am in my religion and my faith at the moment, where it didn't hit close to home with me for that. So the aspect of looking at it from a traditional horror side of things, it was a little bit more predictable than I had wanted it to be. I had more fun trying to keep up with Haunting at Hill House than what I did with this one. So from the cinematic standpoint of guessing and being more intrigued from episode to episode, was there more for Haunting at Hill House. But this one had that aspect of everything that I've grown up listening to with Christianity as a whole that was super intriguing, where it was fun to see somebody in a spot that I feel like I'm at in my life right now, represented on film so well, talking to somebody who arguably wasn't judging him for how he felt about anything. And that's so hard to, you don't see that very often. And that was what was fun to see Father Pruitt essentially take Riley on and be like, no, he understands. Like the father understands. Like we all go through this. It's a learning thing. Like we want to be here for you on the other side. And you don't see that shown in film very often.
Yeah. And honestly, before we dive into the vampiric stuff, if you've grown up in faith, everyone has experienced a fucking Beth.
Yeah.
Like,
oh god,
I wanted death to befall her in the most heinous of ways, but I was like, I've known a lot of Beths in my time. And the conversation, honestly, that Beth has with Riley's mom, where she's like, why does it bother you that God doesn't love you more than he loves Riley? That like is a nail on the fucking head of people like Beth, where they have this like holier than thou, like you're missing the point.
And I don't mean to correct you here, but it's Bev.
Yeah.
Not
Beth. Sorry.
So no, I just didn't want people to be confused if they were listening to this, be like, who's this Beth character? I didn't figure. But if you've seen the show, you know exactly who we're talking about. And I felt that same way, where that scene when, like, near the end, when Riley's mother is talking to her, I was like, holy shit, this is what I wished people asked people like this, because it's important to know, like, what is so terrifying to you that God could love somebody equally to you? It's weird.
Yeah.
For sure.
But vampiric lore, and I'm ready to just, pun intended, to have your teeth sunk into this, Clayton. But it was almost like a Seth Graham Smith style of writing, where you take something like the Bible, you take something cool, and you're like, how can I work this into each other? Where it's like, actually, yeah, given the context of the Bible, this vampire could be an angel, because people are scared every time it's recounted. So I want you to take this away, because I know that we feel similar on this.
Yeah. Well, we got to see, it's always nice to see vampires as true monsters, because they've been so romanticized. And of course it's cool to see like Interview with a Vampire and things along those lines, where a vampire is young forever and beautiful forever and has all these cool powers, and I want to be like that because they have powers and they're cool. But it's always nice to go back to the roots and see something monstrous and scared. And in this, the way the light reflects off their eyes when they're in the darkness, to just kind of add like a little bit of creepiness. And then his wings, and just, oh man, just everything about the vampire design is great. But you're right, they so eloquently weave vampiric lore into the Bible, even so far as Bev, I think, takes the lead with some of this, but she uses Revelation to explain like why this vampire and vampirism is okay, like why what's happening to Father Pruitt is okay, and it should happen. So, and we learn that Father Pruitt is acting selfishly at the end, but he definitely believes, up until he finally sees the plan revealed, he definitely believes that, yeah, he's using this for selfish reasons, but he believes that this is a gift from God. He believes that the vampire is an angel because of the scripture and how well this vampire fits into it. And let's not forget, he finds the vampire in this like ruin of a holy city in Israel. I mean, it all is just, it just lines up so eloquently, and that is just, it's phenomenal. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And honestly, like, I feel like everything was done so tastefully to lead up to the moment that when the vampire walks in dressed in the priest's garments, it wasn't cheesy. And like, that is something that really deserves acknowledgement and needs to be applauded, because that so easily could have been mishandled and gone the other way. We were like, this is not hitting home. But that was so fucking cool when all of a sudden, boom, he was in the back of the sanctuary. Yeah, walking up, and it was like, holy shit.
Yeah, and I wish my memory was good enough to remember exactly which Revelations was referenced, but it was like like the third horn blow and a couple of the bowls that are revealed, and it talks about blood being, the power behind God, and the darkness, how darkness will cover the earth, and they kind of use that to justify how they can't go out in the sunlight. It's just so clever the way they wrap the two together. And you're exactly right. It's very Seth Graham Smith vibes. And if you guys have not read Seth Graham Smith's works, he did the Unholy Night. He did Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter. So
very different from the movie.
Very different from the movie. He unfortunately did a terrible job bringing it. He was the screenwriter of the movie, if you can believe it. But his talent is taking like either a historical story or like in Unholy Night, he takes the birth of Christ story and the three wise men and like works a new story into it so that it fits but becomes something new. And that's exactly what they did here. And it was so very cool.
Yeah, and while you were talking about that, I looked up the revelation that they use. It's Revelation 16, which is talking about the 7 bowls, is what it is, and it just talks about the plagues that are supposed to essentially plague Earth when Jesus' resurrection is coming. And it talks about like the seas turn to blood, the waters turn to blood, the 4th bowl is poured out, and the sun causes a major heat wave to scorch the planet with fire, and then the 5th bowl is poured out with thick darkness overwhelms the kingdom. And they even referred to the kingdom of beast at that point, which is why it fits so well with vampiric lore, because the idea is you're not a human anymore, you're something beyond that. So it's the idea that you could live in the darkness and you could live off of blood and all that type of stuff, which is crazy because I've never seen it done that way. I think that's what was so fun about this whole series is it's unraveling. I felt like it at first when they introduced the idea of a vampire, which happens, like you were saying, Corbin, very early on, where I was like, I feel like this is going towards vampiric lore. I got a little hesitant, and then listening to them weave it into scripture is what kept me intrigued, where I was like, this is so crazy because I would have never interpreted it that way. But then when they lay it out for you, you're like, holy shit, like that actually like fits. It's not just like it's somebody's interpretation of what we've grown up reading is like given to you. And you're like, how did I never see it that way? Where it all of a sudden becomes more relatable because it almost feels believable.
Right.
Yeah.
Corbin hit the nail on the head. I also, after watching most of the second episode, I actually text Corbin and Tim, and I said, I know exactly what's happening, exactly what's happened, and exactly what's going to happen. Let's see if I'm right. And I did, like Corbin mentioned, accurately predict like what was going on with Father Pruitt and that it was a vampire and this was his motive. But what I didn't predict and what made it so phenomenal was how they interweaved vampiric lore with the religious lore and used that to motivate everything. And that's really what brought it up. It was okay. And in fact, I even forgot it was even like so predictable in the beginning because of how good that made it.
Yeah. Something else that I think this show does a phenomenal job with is kind of overcoming the issues that modern horror has. And my easiest way to describe this is liking it to Seinfeld, where the ongoing modern joke is that almost everything that happened in Seinfeld that caused like the episode to unfold wouldn't happen in today's life because it could have been resolved with a text or a phone call, like accessibility. Like Seinfeld is region locked in this decade of like communication or lack thereof. Modern horror has to try extra hard to create scenarios of isolation. Movies like The Strangers, like you have to be in these very specific moments. Otherwise, if you're not, you have to then work harder to explain to the viewer why these people are trapped in this scenario. And them being on this island allows so much levity and freedom that it's believable that they're on this island on a dying town, so they're isolated. So that already in of itself is this nice self-contained, you got nowhere to run. But because you're on this self-contained dying island, you then also have these sects of ideologies that are amplified to the nth degree. And I just thought that the situation that it was all constructed in, as far as the world goes, was expertly done.
Yeah, and I think something that's interesting to hit on, even within that subject that you're talking about, is I think that's why you see Riley walk away from it being like, this is bullshit, is because he experienced the outside world. So he came back with this perception of, why should I believe what this person's preaching to me? I've seen how disgusting the world is out there. You could just as easily be lying to me. Where the average person in this town, because they weren't given as much experience in the outside world per se, they were easy to essentially pull the blind or to blindfold and just blindly lead along, because why shouldn't they trust somebody that came from the same place that Pruitt came from? Like he showed up and he's like, I've known Pruitt. You guys can believe me because I know him. And that's all they needed. And Riley was like, well, that doesn't make any sense. Like, why should I just believe this random stranger? And I think it's an interesting bridge there where I think they hit a lot on the exposure to the outside world being something that shaped the way that a lot of people believe, because then Aaron quickly jumps on board with Riley. I mean, obviously seeing is believing, which she sees the hard way, but she already knew that something was kind of a little bit fishy there, where she was starting to kind of get some uneasy feelings as well. And it was interesting. I think the one, and maybe you guys didn't feel the same way about it with me, there was one thing that I had a little bit of a like qualm with was Sarah, who was the doctor? Was it Alex?
Sarah. Sarah.
Her name was Sarah. Okay. Yeah. Alex is the lady that actually plays her. But yeah, Sarah, her mother, I felt like it was weird that they very distinctly point out at one point she leaves the church and she's like, Sarah, I don't want you to go back. That's not who I know. And then she just goes back into his arms later on. Like that felt a little bit weird to me, where she was so dead set on not allowing Sarah to go back to talk to Pruitt. And then all of a sudden, and sure, she does go younger, goes back to the best version of herself, where she was probably infatuated with Pruitt at that point. So if you believe her mental state goes back there, then that makes sense. But her mental state was also progressing the same way she was as she was aging backwards, essentially, throughout the show. And she very clearly is like, Sarah, I don't want you going back there. This is not who I grew up knowing. And then like 2 episodes later is like back hugging him and like in love with the dude. And I was like, that seems a little bit weird to me. That was the only thing that I was a little bit frustrated with. But that also might be summed up with, that was when he started realizing that he had kind of led them astray, where he had started changing his ideal on it. And maybe she was picking up on that.
Yeah. That's kind of where I was going to go with
interpreted that.
Yeah.
But man, for as many things I loved about this show, the prosthetics in this show were fucking garbage.
Thank
the
you
aesthetic,
for bringing it up.
the prosthetics on Riley's parents were awful. The mom was awful. And honestly, the prosthetics on the mom are made worse by her acting, because you do this thing when you're acting like an old person where you just try a little too hard. She was trying to be like, oh, I'm talking like an old lady.
Yeah.
I'm breathy and I'm struggling to talk. Like, man, like when she was on screen, you immediately know that she's going to de-age or something, because it makes absolutely no sense that a young actress is playing this old person.
Yeah. It takes you out of it for sure, because like you said, you know immediately. So, okay, they're either going to de-age or there's going to be flashbacks, or both. Like something is going on here with all of these young actors in terrible old makeup. Like it's unexcusable with what we can do. Like all I kept thinking about, and it was because I had just seen a preview for Jackass 4, and it made me think of in Jackass when they make Johnny Knoxville look like his grandpa. Like how can Jackass make Johnny Knoxville look like a grandpa that you wouldn't look twice at? But this guy with Netflix budget, couple $1 million probably, tens of millions of dollars, can't make these people look old.
Yeah, and I think the one that got me, and maybe I was viewing it wrong, was I agree up to that point, up through the show, you feel like a lot of the prosthetics are kind of a little bit weird, but it was when Aaron was dying at the end, and she's like bleeding from the neck, and there's a very clear line on her neck that is where they had like taped this prosthetic across it, where you can see the blood like running along, and it's almost like outlining this like very straight line. And I was like, wow, that's unfortunate that you can clearly see it's like a peelable piece of plastic that's on her neck instead of her actual neck.
Yeah.
But and I felt like that made her death a little less impactful for me, because I was stuck staring at that the whole time. And I was like,
well, it makes you
while
wonder
we're on that,
why not only did they not catch it when doing the prosthetic, they didn't catch it while filming, and they didn't catch it while editing. Like, what are these people doing?
Yeah, well,
I don't understand.
To be fair, if you go back and watch Harry Potter, in the Sorcerer's Stone, when he and Draco are dueling on the tables, there's a moment where if you pause it, you can see a cameraman with the students standing next to the table. So
really,
it happens even in the best circumstances. But while we're on that death scene,
inexcusable even in the best circumstances.
Yeah. But while we're on that death scene, how the fuck did the vampire fly at all? Given how much she ripped those wings to fucking shreds.
Yeah, that was another issue I had. Not
Like,
necessarily
take a kite and do that, and we'll see if it flies.
Yeah, but I mean, we've seen other, like the Great Mouse Detective. That bat in that movie had holes, and he could still fly around. So, my issue with that is that he didn't heal. Why wouldn't his wings have healed?
I mean, he was literally feeding at
the time. He was feeding at the time. So, if anything, his healing should be at its max. I did like, though, bringing that up, how distracted and animalistic he was when he was feeding. The kids literally shot it and set it on fire.
Stop it.
Yeah, it was like, stop, quit shooting me. And then she just kept cutting its wings while it was eating her, and it didn't care. Yeah. That to me was a real subtle but great addition to detail.
Yeah, no, I thought that scene, there were aspects of that scene that was done really well, and so much of it that wasn't done well. And I think it would have been more impactful if the vampire had not been able to fly away because of how traumatic that scene was in her life, where the mother was talking about clipping the bird's wings so they couldn't fly. I feel like that would have been more impactful because it even hits on that where she knows she's sacrificing herself for the sake of the greater good, where it's like the disturbing scene when she like leads him back to her neck. So he's not, and I was like, that's super disturbing. So I feel like it would have been more impactful to see it like take off and immediately like crash because it couldn't fly. And then it like had this realization that its greed was like the reason it's in this circumstance. And that would have been, I think, way more impactful than allowing it to fly off and then be like, oh, can it make it to land?
Yeah.
You're like, oh.
Yeah, to me, that was, even though this is listed as a limited series, that to me was too obvious a cop-out if they ever wanted to do more. Yeah. Like, they put that in there for that specific reason. Because you're right, it would have meant a lot more to the viewer if it couldn't make it, if it couldn't fly. So real quick, we are running a little long.
Raul Cooley was amazing. I just want to say that.
What?
I at least want to say that Raul Cooley was phenomenal.
Oh, yeah, he was great.
Actor played the sheriff.
Yeah. Sheriff Hassan. He was great. Now, there's another big thing that I didn't like. One was the prosthetics, and Corbin brought that up. The other one was the excessive need for long, meaningless monologues. And episode 4, where I said at the beginning, where the show almost lost me, is when, or maybe it was episode 3, whenever Riley and Aaron it's right after Aaron finds out she lost the baby, and they're having this long conversation
about
death, and it just really felt pretentious and long.
He's talking about mattering
and yes, it was just, and the way he was sitting and looking while he was talking, and then even her, I don't know, man, and then there was another one that she did in a later episode, and I can't remember the circumstance, but I remember thinking, you just like these long monologues, don't you? Or whoever wrote your character likes these long monologues for you. It just really, they didn't need it. It was so good without these long, and I say pretentious because that's what it felt like. It felt like some fresh out of film school, I'm going to write some epic monologue that actors can use to audition for later kind of monologue, and it just ended up being corny for me, cheesy.
Which is weird because I also feel like one of my favorite conversations is the conversation at the church between Father Pruitt and Riley, where that conversation does go on for a long time, but that
one feels good. Yes, that one
it's because of what I said, where Pruitt, he has this way of delivering his lines where it's just, there's no question of what you're watching a person talk. Yeah, I think it's just his acting abilities on a different caliber.
Yeah, this was his show. He ran away with it.
And I feel like the other one for me was the scene where they're talking about death. And then as much as I liked getting some of the sheriff's backstory, I feel like the backstory that he laid out in the sheriff's office went on just a little too long, when he's like walking through why he doesn't want to interrogate the church because of where he came from. I felt like that was another one of those where they're giving you this opportunity to get to know the sheriff, but maybe a little bit too much, where you're like, okay, just stop talking now, please. Like it makes sense as to why you're here and why you wouldn't want to do that 5 minutes ago.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. In situations like that, it is like, I agree. I think they need to find a way of making it more concise. Not to say that what he had to say wasn't important, or that it's not interesting to hear that kind of perspective that maybe we're not used to. But it was a little overindulgent. Maybe that's too harsh of a term, but it just should have been cleaned up a little bit.
Yeah, no, I think it's definitely something that is worth having in there, because I think it's overlooked a lot of times when we're talking about this type of stuff, where the doctor didn't even realize that by having him do that could cause all of these external crises for the sheriff. So it made sense to go into it and to portray that aspect, especially when Islam and religion as a whole are so conflicting in the series. It's fun to see it even from more of like a secular standpoint as to why they're at difference. But yeah, it was, other than that, I agree. It's funny. I mentioned this to Clayton a couple of days ago, after we recorded our last episode, where I'm coming to find out that Clayton and I share a lot of ideals with a lot of the stuff that we consume, where we come out at on the other side feeling a lot of the same thing. And I couldn't have said it better myself, where the issues I had were that some of the dialogue lost me, because I was like, it's running on a little long. But
yeah, I will be interested in hearing, honestly, we won't do it on the podcast, but off cast, I'm curious to see what Tim eventually thinks when he finally finishes the show, because even tiny details like the suitcase, I didn't pick up on this, but like Morgan also is an avid Stephen King fan, much akin to Tim is. And something that Stephen King does a lot in his books have to do with vampires is the transporting through luggage. And there's just, I don't remember them now, but there are a lot of other things in the show where she was like, oh, like that's just like Stephen King does. And so I imagine there's going to be a lot of things that Tim will like and probably say to us off cast where that kind of hits home for him.
I want to, because I didn't know this. I've had Mike Flanagan pulled up on the side, and I've kind of been like reading stuff while we're talking. Did you guys know? So I've seen the movie Hush. I didn't know for a long time until actually just now that he had written that one, or directed, whatever you want to say.
I didn't.
But they actually have a book in there that he labels, I think, as far as I can tell, it was labeled Midnight Mass in that one, that he used as an Easter egg to be like, no, this one's still coming out. Like, that's how long ago, because that was in 2006.
Oh, is that what that clip is from? I saw that clip on TikTok, and I was like, what is this from? That's not from like Hill House. So it's from Hush.
Yeah, I think he uses it as a clip, and I think he leaves an Easter egg in Hush, and then Gerald's Game. I think he leaves a Easter egg in both. And then something else that maybe you guys knew this, and I just don't know enough about Mike Flanagan. Did you know that his wife is Erin Green in this? Kate Siegel is his wife.
I did not know they were married. No.
Yeah, I had no idea.
That would explain, but it makes sense. She's the stuff.
Yeah, she's the lead actress in Hush too, which it all makes sense now. But
yeah,
interesting. Just an interesting little fact there that I thought I would share.
One last thing, because I teased it in the beginning and we kind of didn't get a chance, and I don't want it to start like a whole nother rabbit hole, but episode 5 is the episode where Riley wakes up, and the whole episode basically is him and Father Pruitt talking. That's the episode where we get Bev's interpretation of Revelation and Riley being chosen, and Bev kind of the internal struggle within her, like, why did Riley get chosen? And Monsignor explains it away, about how God chooses and we have to rise to, accept that, and free will and all this stuff. And then at the end, he decides he's not going to be a part of it and tells Aaron and kills himself. That whole episode is just perfection to me. I loved it. And I'm so glad that episode came after episode 4, because like I was really just yawning after those long dialogue scenes, and then we get this like television perfection in the very next episode, and it really sets up just the roller coaster that the last 2 episodes is. So, but I just wanted to touch on that before we.
And just one thing to add to that, I think what's so weird about that episode being as good, it like has no right to be as good as it is when you're left with this like weird cliffhanger at the end of 4 where Riley gets attacked. You like come to the realization that it is in fact everything that we thought. It's vampires. It's like this giant revelation. And then episode 5 is pretty much just dialogue. And you're like, no, I want to know more about the vampires.
Right, exactly.
And so you're like, it can't be this good. And then you're watching it and you're intrigued the whole time. You're like, this is exactly, I didn't know this is what I wanted in the next episode, but this is what I needed.
Yeah.
It's weird.
And kudos to them. They pull an Attack on Titan almost where, the main character dies at the end of an episode. And I remember I had this on at work. And I was just, I had it on the background, wasn't really paying attention. And then like I see him walk in and look in, and then you see the vampire finally do something like vampiric, not just be creepy in the background. He flies across and grabs him and starts killing him. And I raised my hands up and was like, what, at work? And I was like, it's a good thing there's nobody in here because this really surprised me.
Yeah. I was like, oh, shit.
Yeah.
They killed the main character.
Yeah, they killed the main character. And then, of course, he's not dead, but they still killed him because he chose to kill himself. So.
Yes. And it looked fucking awesome.
Yeah, it did.
Yeah.
So, all right. Any final thoughts before we get out of here? Because we probably are right at an hour once we take out the beginning.
No, definitely take advantage and watch it during the spooky season. I think that
100%.
was kind of like the intrigue behind it that got me interested. I was like, oh, I want to watch something in October that's spooky. This seems fun. I think it's like the perfect season for this.
It really
TV
is.
show.
Yeah. I'm so glad that I watched it early on too, because I'm in spooky mode. Like that's how good I left this show. Like this show left me. Like I'm ready to start rewatching some Halloween in preparation for Halloween Kills. Like let's get going. Let's do this. So
no, I 100% agree. No, it came out at the perfect time. It's ignited me. So now like Morgan and I have been watching spooky stuff almost every night since then. We just watched a movie on Netflix called All Who Enter Dies or something like that. It's a new horror movie that's on, and it's okay. It's pretty good. But
next time on The Master Dies, will he live or die?
Well, I was laughing. The main character was reaching a point where I was like, this is the point of no return. And I was like, well, the title does give it away.
Oh, that's funny. All right, boys. Jesse, thank you again for joining us, stepping in. And we always enjoy having you on.
Happy to be here.
Hey, you're one of the boys.
Yeah, you're one of the boys. As always, if you enjoy what we do and you're on an Apple device, scroll down to the bottom of your podcast screen and give us a 5-star rating and leave us a kind word or two if you don't care. If you're not on an Apple device, that's okay. You can help us in other ways. You can share the podcast with friends and family and acquaintances and work people and the janitor who cleans your kid's school. If you enjoy our content, I know that you know of somebody else who would as well. And what makes content better than sharing with those you love? If you really love what we do, visit us over at patreon.com/thenerdosphere, where you can support us by as little as $1 a month and get access to our Patreon exclusive podcast Nerd Tea, where we chat about things that are outside the nerd realm and more in line with just normal stuff, like what cereal's best and Halloween candy that may be the best. I think is something we're going to talk about, ranking Halloween candy.
We're ranking the best Halloween candy.
Yeah,
so when you were a kid, you're trick-or-treating, the do's and keeps, or the do's and don't keeps.
And want to know more about us, that's going to be a deep dive, so check us out.
We typically have the most heated discussions over the most monotonous
like
things,
office etiquette. I think we had the most heated debate over office etiquette than anything on this podcast. Like Tim legitimately got angry.
Yeah. And I got angry back.
Yeah. And I was like, hi.
but like in a fun way. I feel like that also needs to be prefaced. Like we were angry in a fun way in the sense of like you're not gonna listen to it, and like it's not like it's not entertaining.
Oh yeah, it's entertaining anger. It's not like yelling at each other, not talking to each other for a day anger. It's just intense debate. Well, we thank you again for joining us, and we will see you in the next spooky episode of the Nerdosphere. I'm so glad that it cut him off.
I know, yeah.
Like, you went so high and so loud, it just like stopped listening to you.
I kind of want to find that sound bite and add it to the theme music.
I don't think so. All right, we'll see you. Bye.
See ya.